had a very proper way of dealing with people, even if he was victorious in battles. Then there was a revolt from some other extremist groups called the Qadrites, who also didn't like Ali, because Ali had set off with an army to try and bring this Muawiyah to justice in Syria. They got to a river, they'd had a battle for 3 days, and it was a draw. Ali's army was winning, which would have been amazing for history had he won. But at the last minute, Muawiyah and his lot put Qurans on the ends of their spear and said, no, we're fighting for the Quran, you know. And such was the superstition of even many of Ali's forces that they refused to fight on. Well, it was all stage play, it was all engineered, and it went to arbitration, and the arbitration was rigged against Ali. And the people that refused the arbitration, who didn't like this whole business and thought he should have carried on fighting, then revolted against Ali. He won the battle, but I mean, you know, none of this should have been happening. If he'd have been made the caliph first off, none of this chaos would have been happening. And then in 661, he was then assassinated personally, Ali, leading prayers in Kufa. He was knifed to death by one of these extremists, the Kharijites. And there ended the man that knew more about the Quran, more about Islam than anyone else at that point on the planet. And it's this whole sequence of events I've been describing as a tragedy of incalculable consequences for humanity, because we lost the actual truth about the Quran. We lost the openness and wisdom to interpret it properly, which is what Ali had. And he was told, this was common knowledge. Ali knew the meaning of these verses. I mean, I'm just trying to reconstruct with the scholarly means at my disposal and the whatever insights I can glean from the prophetic intelligence to try and shed some light on what I think the original, real meaning of the Quran was. Ali could have done a much better job, you know, but he's dead and gone. Okay, so his son, Hassan, is briefly made caliph by the supporters, because Ali wasn't defeated in battle, he was defeated by a sneaky assassin. And Ali was buried in the secret place at Najaf, because they knew that probably someone would come up and desecrate the corpse if it was a public place. So Hassan became the caliph. But Muawiyah engineered, he so hated Ali and everything he stood for, they were on opposing sides. It's like Boris Johnson on the one hand and the liars that have captured the British state, who are sneaky, don't care about assassinating people. I mean, I have evidence that one of my closest friends, who was an anti-Brexit campaigner, a man called Mark Williams, was assassinated by the extreme Brexit lot when Boris Johnson was foreign minister. I've said this in public. You know, I'll say it again till I die. I think he was murdered. And so what? You know, Muawiyah was doing that to everyone that opposed him. And Hassan's wife was persuaded to poison him. I mean, like, how evil can you get? You know, a wife and a husband should owe each other unconditional love. And yet this one was corrupted, bribed by Muawiyah to poison her own husband, who was the son of Ali and the grandson of the Prophet. And the Prophet had loved Hassan, knew him as a boy, you know, again, so, and Ali had passed down to Hassan a lot of his wisdom, a lot of his teachings. So poor old Hassan goes now, he's killed by a poisonous wife in 670. And that wife, Jada, then fled off to Muawiyah and got paid off, you know. Just up, again, this is the story of how evil and ignorance haunts history, right? Where's the truth in all this? The people that know the truth, Muhammad, oh, by the way, it's said that Muhammad might well have also been poisoned. He died very young at 63. very probable that the Quraysh, the extremists, having failed to defeat him in battle several times, eventually succeeded by poisoning him. There should be an inquest. We should still find out. It's a bit like Yasser Arafat. He seems to have died of poison. It's the weapon of choice in certain Middle East, cultures. Find out what happened to Muhammad. Have an inquest. He was poisoned too, it seems. And then Ali's killed, and then Hassan, his son, is killed. So that the witnesses of truth are being bumped off here. Oh dear. So anyway, his brother, Hussain, succeeds as the Imam, the true inheritor of the wisdom that had come from Muhammad down through Ali. He's the younger son, Hussain. And in the same year, Muawiyah dies. Thank God. What an evil person. Gone from history, gone to judgment. And the Quran doesn't paint a pretty picture of what happens to evil people when they die. And I tend to agree with it. They go to the fires of their own conscience. Anyway, his son, Yazid, becomes the ruler of Syria and inherits his same totalitarian ruthlessness. Yazid is a very nasty chap. And Hussein refuses to acknowledge his right to rule Syria. Hussein has inherited from Ali, his father, a notion that integrity should rule politics. He would have loved my Truth and Veracity Bill for parliamentarians. So would Ali. That's how they lived, right? So instead, Hussein refuses, says, no, I'm not going to accept you as governor of Syria. And he won't give him homage. So what Yazid does is send an army to kill him. And Hussein isn't a very good general. He sets off to Kufa from Medina with only 72 companions. All his family, the women and children, they all set out on this journey. And they're met along the way by an army sent by Yazid. Huge army. Well, you can probably tell what's going to happen. There's a battle at a place called Karbala. It's not really a battle, it's a slaughter. And Yazid's troops surround Hussein's 72 companions and women and children. And one by one, they're all killed off, including Hussein. There's a brother of Hussein, a half-brother, Abbas, who tries to get water from them because they're dying of thirst in the desert. And he's has his hands chopped off and killed. I mean, it was gruesome stuff, and only one boy escapes. One son, Ali Zain al-Abidin, escapes. I'm not sure how, but thank God. Somehow he escapes from the battlefield, which is really important. And that event of Karbala is celebrated, commiserated, mourned by Shia Muslims every year, ever since. And it's a very moving event because, the wisdom that Muhammad represented, the wisdom that Ali represented, the wisdom that Hassan represented, and then Hussein, they've all been slaughtered. They've all been poisoned, killed off. And we can't anymore access that wisdom. If the Quran really was from God, was from the divine intelligence, we don't know what it means because the people that now control it have faked it. And in fact, what was going on at this time is that the scholars, you can buy scholars, you buy biographers. So the Ummayad dynasty, which supported Yazid and Muawiyah, now got scholars to write fake hadiths, right? So propaganda against Ali and against Hussein, and saying no, they're all crazy. So propaganda, this distortion of truth into lies, is a feature of these power struggles going right back in history. That's why I'm sharing this in such detail. And it is shocking. So what happens every year in the world's largest annual procession? over 20 million people flocked to the shrine of Hussain, who died at Karbala, in a walk from Najaf, which is where Ali's buried, in Iraq, to Karbala. And here they hold their hands to their hearts and roar, Labayka ya Hussain, which means, I am here for you, Hussain. Now this is a symbolic response to Hussein's question on the battlefield, when he stood alone after losing everyone in his camp and pleading, is there anyone there to help me? I mean, this is extraordinary. You couldn't make this up, could you? This is Hussain, the grandson of the Prophet, who's channeled these incredible thoughts from the divine intelligence for all of us, for our benefit. And we can't access them because they've killed off the people that knew. And this man, Hussain, who had some portion of that wisdom, has now watched as all his companions have been slaughtered. And he shouts out, is there anyone left to help me? And there wasn't. He was killed, that he died. But incredibly, and this is the good news, this is the beauty of history. Every year now, the world's largest annual procession goes to that spot. Sometimes 20 million people. And they shout out together, Labayka ya Hussain. I am here for you, Hussain. Now I find that incredibly moving. I don't know about you. I find that heartwarming that in spite of the horrors of history, in spite of the terrors and the cruelties, people are willing to show up still for the truth. So, and this is, you can read about it yourself, The Prophet's Heir, The Life of Ali ibn Abi Talib by Hassan Abbas, who's a very great scholar. He's a professor of international relations in Washington, D.C. And he's spent 10 years writing this book, interviewing scholars and people all over the world. It's the first really detailed scholarly Western biography of Ali. I mean, it's long, long overdue, this book. Because I got interested in all this when I first read the Quran back in the late 70s, early 80s, at the time of the, the Shah Khomeini fights and the Iranian Revolution. I wanted to understand what was going on. And when I discovered the Quran and the Shia traditions and the Sunni and so on, I've spent a lifetime since, amongst all my other duties as an intellectual, trying to understand what was actually happening. And it is very enlightening for us to reflect on these tragic events and to see how history is full of these tragedies. People of evil, people who lust after power, who use lies, who create fake stories. Like Muawiyah and Yazid did, and suppressing the facts around the Prophet and his actual legacy. Yeah, it's worrying. But what is fortunate is that people will still show up. And that I find heartening. This is good news. And that's where I come to my question really to you. I mean, and what is the role of intellectuals? If you've listened to me and you appreciate my talks, are you willing to show up now for truth? And how do we do it? Because, there are so many distortions and perversions of truth, so many fake hadiths out there, that none of us really know anymore, which group to shout with. Should we be with that, don't ever vaccinate people, it's dangerous lobby? Or should we be with the, got to vaccinate everyone, it's the only way to save us all lobby? Etc. I think people are really confused. People are really in a turmoil. I mean, I have both friends on all sides of these debates, and I've never seen society quite so polarised. And it's the same with Brexit. Again, people are utterly confused by the propaganda. I think there it's pretty clear and straightforward. The Brexit lot were the Yazids of my culture, who stole the culture, seized what British identity is all about, which is fair play, anti-racism, kindness, genuine liberalism, genuine love and democracy, twisted it all around and repackaged it as a sort of fanatical racial populism that is complete opposite of what Britishness is actually about. Well, that's what Yazid and Muawiyah did with Islam. They transformed the brilliant idea that Muhammad had and Ali supported him in of a genuine spiritual reformation that would enable people to access the true divine unity in the heart of brotherhood, sisterhood with all people, egalitarianism, support for the poor, the downtrodden, and an end to war and violence, and replace that with the complete opposite, which is classism, perpetual war, a sort of fake tribal deity suppressing all other deities, like an endless religious war, jihad, which was not what authentic Islam was about at all. And it's been the same thing's been done in the Brexit case. What is true British culture has been replaced by this fake hysterical populism of Brexit, nonsense. And Boris Johnson is just the sort of lackey, he's the Yazid of that movement. So what do we do? What do true intellectuals do? Are there any of us left? Well, I think there's a few. I hear some occasionally from some. I mean, there's a few million of us in Britain that can see through the tragedy of Brexit. I don't know anyone else who's fasting every week against it, but I am, and I will continue to do so. I think genuine intellectuals, we have a duty to rise above the chaos, the hysteria, and really look at what's going on objectively, just as the Druids did in ancient times. I mean, the Druids never fought. I'm not a man of violence. I would never fight, but I will use my Druid skills to see truth, to hold Dharma. That's what a Druid means. It's someone that holds or knows or sees Vidya, the truth, Dharma. That's our duty, and that was the role of the intellectual in the Celtic world, the ancient British world. And, as Peace Druid of Britain, that's still my duty. I'm holding on to that truth, that Dharma, above the battle. And we have to then apply logic and reason and mind power to the analysis of the conflicts and problems going on in the world. And that's why I've set up the European wing. That's why I helped run the European branch of the World Intellectual Forum, for instance, because intellectuals have a duty, I think, to maintain that clarity of thought, even in the midst of the chaos and the battlefield. We have to get an interfaith peace treaty for the whole world. I mean, I've extended the Najran Treaty between the Christians of Najran and Muhammad's Muslim community. I've redrafted it as the Interfaith Peace Treaty. Please read it, sign it, endorse it. It's, to me, the only hope. We have to get the genuine spiritual leaders and elders of the world into accord, into realising that, this is not good enough. We can't go on with these endless battles. I read a horrible report recently of a Jewish MP in the Knesset who was alleging that any Jewess that marries a non-Jew should be killed, because that's what happened in the Bible. You get speared by Phinehas, and this is a jolly good thing, and they should be killed. I mean, come on, what primitive, unbelievable behaviour. I mean, that sort of incitement to murder is what it is. That should surely be dealt with under Israeli law. I mean, I can't get up and say that that should happen in British Parliament. That would be an incitement to murder. So that's, I don't think that guy's going to be signing my Interfaith Peace Treaty anytime soon, but I think the vast majority of moderate and intelligent and good Israelis and Palestinians and Jordanians and Syrians and all the rest would sign it, and I'm praying that, they will. So please, and I want somebody to translate it into Arabic. At the moment it's in Russian, Japanese, German, Swedish, English, French. Put it into Arabic, somebody, contact me. And that's why my institute came into being years ago at the University of London, the International Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy is to look at peace through the lens of comparative philosophy and comparative religion. How can we stop these wars that are going on, these Ridda wars that are going on, everyone fighting everyone else, you know. No, put the guns down, people. Start reading, start studying, read about what happened to Ali, read the Quran, listen to my commentary, read the Bible, read the Gospels, listen to my commentary on the Gospels, read the Dhammapada, read about Buddhism, read the Mahavira texts, the Jain scriptures. You know, let's transform into a planet of scholarship instead of a planet of hysterical militarism. And we can then apply what Socrates called the dialectical process to the comparative analysis of contending truth claims, using my periodic table of the world's religions and philosophies, which, you know, I've shown you on several occasions, and it's on a website, and we're going to make a poster for it soon. So by using that tool, we can transform the hysterical, conflict-ridden discourse into one of a civilized symposium, such as, you know, Plato was able to take notes at. And then we can transform the hysteria of propagandizing into the truth-seeking of genuine intellectual activity. And that's what I'm trying to do with Brexit, obviously, and the pandemic and the Palestinian problem of like, they don't have a state, you know, give them a state, ICEPS, International Commission for the Establishment of a Palestinian State. Let's do it, folks. You know, we owe it to them. The British especially owe it to them, because we created the trouble in the first place by you know, colonising Palestine. And so I think duty calls that the British have to help create a Palestinian state, living in peace and harmony with Israel. Okay, I want to finish with a couple of quotes. There's one of my books, maybe people don't know about, called The Book of Enlightenments. I really enjoyed writing this book back in, I was teaching full-time religious studies, and I gave a lecture in Shrewsbury for the Pagan Federation, and I coined this phrase, Enlightenments, as a Druid. I said, you know, this thing about enlightenment that Eastern religions promote, Buddhism, especially Hinduism, it's always singular, enlightenment, as if it's a one-off thing. You get it, you got it, now I'm enlightened. Yeah, I got my enlightenment. It's like a jab, I got the vaccine. Yeah, I'm enlightened now. I wasn't before, but I've got it now. It's a one-off thing, and it sort of suddenly comes. And, you know, I studied Eastern philosophy for many years. I spent time in a Buddhist monastery, I studied Zen, you know, I sat meditating at the feet of many great Buddhist masters and Hindu and yogis, and I got interested in the question of what is enlightenment, and how do you know if somebody's enlightened, you know? Would they be like floating off the ground? Would they have a sort of semi-transparent body? Do they have great light coming out of their head? I mean, you know, what are the signs of enlightenment? That's one very interesting question, and there is a huge literature on that. It's been developed in Buddhist and Hindu and Jain and other scriptures, is to say there are discernible features if somebody's enlightened. But then I thought, well, why don't we have a comparative study across all the different lineages of enlightenments, and let's talk about enlightenments plural. Let's be scholarly. So I'm a scholar, you know, I'm not a sort of promoter of any one particular ism. I'm an expert in the comparative study of the isms, and I wanted to say let's have a discourse about enlightenments plural. So the book is subtitled Enlightenments, towards a comparative analysis of the philosophies of enlightenment in Eastern and Western thought. Right, so you can see what I'm doing. I'm doing a sort of epistemological study of different teachings about the nature of enlightenment in different traditions and lineages. And this is the first and only time, to my knowledge, I've looked widely, that anyone's ever attempted this. To me, this is like what we should have done hundreds of years ago. Like the very first I mean, this is what Ali was trying to do, actually, and that's why I love him so much. Ali saw the Quran and Islam as a form of enlightenment. And that's what it was, actually. If you read the text and you understand it, as I'm trying to transmit in my commentary, which is only like a tiny, tiny bit of what Ali would have done, it is a form of enlightenment. And so, anyway, this is the first ever attempt to create a comparative epistemology of enlightenments. So I talk about why the plural, which is what I've just explained. And then I look at enlightenment in the European classical philosophical tradition. Because there was such a thing, it's not just an Eastern thing. Enlightenment is a universal quest at the heart of human philosophical endeavour. The Greeks have this wonderful word for it, and that started with Pythagoras, came down to Plato and Aristotle. Enlightenments they call lysis, Lysis. Enlightenments for the Greeks is a loosening of the problem, the puzzle, whatever it is that you're stuck on. Why is there evil? Is there a devil? Why is my wife trying to poison me? These kind of eternal problems. You apply the liquidity of lysis and you get the solution. Lysis comes from a root meaning to dissolve, to release, to set free, and to make liquid. And it's the origin of the word chemical analysis. What you do with a compound is trying to analyze it. You apply liquid. And you do this also in psychoanalysis. Analysis is the intellectual duty of dissolving a puzzle or a problem through applying this lysis. As an analytical philosopher, I was trained as an analytical philosopher. I analyze a problem, I apply lysis, and I get the solution. That's European classical enlightenment. I talk about it. Then I go into Zoroastrian enlightenment. What is that? Enlightenments in Judaism. Christian enlightenments. I'm not going to run through them all. You can read the book. That's a whole other lecture. It's actually a whole course, this book. Christian enlightenments. And then Islamic enlightenments. And in each one I give the word in Arabic or Latin or Greek or Persian or whatever, and explain what it means. Then there's Buddhist enlightenments, which, we're more familiar with the ideas of nirvana, and the great Russian Shavatsky, a great scholar at St. Petersburg, wrote a whole tract on nirvana in early Buddhism. And then there's distinctions between Mahayana, like Buddhism as a collective field of enlightenments for everyone, in which great bodhisattvas can rain enlightenment potential down onto people through grace, like Kuan Yin or Amitabha. So then you pray to them, please Amitabha, give me enlightenment, and it works. There's a certain sort of faith involved in Buddhist enlightenment, Mahayana style. The Lotus Sutra, tells of when Buddha was giving sermons and millions of people on different world systems were all getting enlightened because he winked at them or something. You've got to love these texts, right? If only it were that easy. And then you've got the chapter on Hindu enlightenments, which is very similar to the Buddhist one, actually. And then Chinese enlightenments, as in Taoism and Confucianism. What is the Chinese word for this? And then Shinto, because I have a great love for the Japanese indigenous traditions known as Shintoism, which means the way of the gods, Shentao. And then I have a chapter on pagan and neo-pagan enlightenments, things like Druids and Wiccans and all the ancient pagan schools, the Asatru. Can you reach enlightenment and be a rune master? Yes, you can. Odin, in his own way, was an enlightened deity. He was probably a person who travelled probably to Asia and studied with, we don't know, came back to the Norse and went down as a god, and he had these runes, and he was teaching people how the fundamental building blocks of sound, sonic mysticism, can act as a decoding device for solving the complexities of thought. If we apply runic wisdom to any problem, you can decode it and resolve it. That was Odin's genius, very enlightened guy. And then there's a chapter on transpersonal enlightenment theory, like looking at Ken Wilber and Saggioli and Maslow and Jung and latest thinkers on the psychology of enlightenment. There are people, neuroscientists now doing studies, like there's a certain kind of brainwave put out when you reach enlightenment. That's very interesting and should be studied. And then there's a chapter on Jainism and enlightenment, because I've known lots of amazing enlightened Jains, and they're to die for, really amazing people. And let's have more of that enlightenment, please, and less of the Yazid, Muawiyah, Boris Johnson, idiotic anti-enlightenment. I mean, these people are anti-enlightenment, and they fake and they pose and they write fake hadiths. Anyway, there we are. That's that book. I really love this book. Why isn't it in every bookshop in the world? You know, why don't people read this stuff? Please get it, read it. You know, get your bookshop to stock it. This important stuff. It's the only book of its kind, right? And I think we're dying of anti-enlightenment trends. We're dying of the fake sharks that are trying to destroy us, and using populist nationalism to defeat true unity. You know, remember what the UN stands for. It stands for the commonality of every nation is in this together. I've spoken at the UN headquarters. I've been to New York. I love New York. It's my other home, you know. We should not be divided as peoples and as nations. This is why I don't agree with Alexander Dugin and some Russian pseudo-intellectuals that say the West is all evil and we hate the West. No, my friend, we don't. Tolstoy and the true Russian tradition of Rurik and Blavatsky and the true Russian intellectuals don't hate the West. You know, the West and the East are the same. Have you not noticed the sun goes round and round and what was West becomes East? I mean, for God's sake, grow up, you know. Let's have a world system view based on love and genuine universalism, not populist nationalism, which is why Brexit is such a stupid nonsense. So look, yeah, blessings. Now I'm going to finish with my poem, my last poem of the, my last poem for the this time. This is a little poem, it's a sort of humorous thing. I wrote it in Athens. I love Athens, that's my other home. The founder of King's College, where I was a student at the University of London, I love King's, I was baptised there, he asked for his ashes to be scattered on the Acropolis in Athens, and it's a good place to be. It's a great place. This is called Acropolis. 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 Apocalypse. Pucker your lips for the sharp kiss of the bright-helmed one. The heart of the city held aloft by the secrets of reverse gravity. The fundamental pylons that sustain the skies rise up here. Petrified forest of supernatural trees. The olive whose light covers all ways, east and west, sea and desert, mountain and plain. All those stretch out from here. Their roots run deep into the hill and travel wide and far from here. Wherever breath is spoken, wherever life shares with breath, thought through air. We zigzag home from here, each descending our own separate ways from the propylia. We came and saw the spectacle, how that one loved, and that one yearned, and this one lost, then sought, then found. It is a brief story, swiftly told. It is a walking out of feet,